So my name is Annette LeBaron, and I'm going to be hosting you guys tonight. So thank you guys all for coming. What a beautiful day, wonderful summer. Hope you guys enjoyed your summer. And it looks like we're having second summer now. Let's all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to our republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Have a seat. And Pat Colbeck, who is our keynote speaker for tonight, is going to be giving us the invocation.
Thank you, Annette. And dear God, thank you very much for all the folks who've worked hard to pull this event together. And we thank you for all those that are here to hear truths that they're not hearing anywhere else, God. And we just ask for you to light a fire under everybody that's here today, help them to go off and share this information, be salt and light out in the world. And please guide us as we go home from this event in safety, and help us to secure this upcoming 2026 election and put America back on solid footing to give you the glory. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, it's working. Wait a minute. Oh, I'm really screwing up here. You know what? Hold on a second. It's new for me. This is all new. All right. So I figured we'd have to start with a little bit of prayer and thought for Charlie Kirk. And I had something written, and I just thought, you know what? I got a few stories that I just want to say instead of reading something that I wrote. And I'm sure we're all touched in terms of what happened over the last week. And there's a cloud over us, and the air seems a little heavier, and we're probably all dealing with this a little bit differently. But I went to go get my hair cut on Tuesday. She cut a little bit too much off, but that's okay. And I brought up the subject of Charlie Kirk with my hairdresser. And she said, she goes, I never heard of Charlie Kirk before. She goes, I went and picked up my son at school, and he had a friend with him, and they were driving in the back of the car, and they were looking at their phones, and they were starting to say that Charlie Kirk got shot, and he passed away, and they were very upset. And she said, my son's friend just kept chatting and chatting and chatting about how wonderful Charlie Kirk was. She goes, when I got home, my social media was filled with him. She goes, I started watching all of these clips and debates and his podcast. And she goes, you know what? I wish I knew Charlie Kirk. He was a very good guy. And here's the other thing she said to me. She goes, I started watching The Chosen. So I'm thinking to myself, this man probably has no idea the kind of impact. So I didn't complain that she cut my hair too short, because she did, she touched my heart when she said that. And then the last thing I want to mention is, and many of you might know this, Charlie Kirk had 3,500 chapters, turning point chapters around the United States. And that is a combination of high school students and universities. 2 days ago, Turning Point USA just posted they had 57,000 applications. Yeah, isn't that amazing? Absolutely incredible. So he is touching so many, and I'm just so proud I was alive to see him. And we'll continue his work in the best way that I can. So I'm just curious, who here is a new member or first time here? Just raise your hand. Oh, we got a few people here. Well, welcome. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it. Please fill out any information. There's an application if you're interested in joining. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And then also, if you have any feedback for us, this might be your first time here, happy to get some feedback in terms of what you think of today's meeting. So thank you for coming. So that's what I was going to talk about, the meeting survey. For those of you that have been here before, you might be saying, why are we here? We usually go to the Iroquois Club, and we have a nice meal, and we sit around and chat, and we have wine. And in fact, I heard some people say, do you guys got wine? Where's the wine? And I thought about running. I guess they got new carpet, and they said we can't bring red wine. We could have brought white, but we're like, let's just see how it goes. We don't even know if anyone's going to show up for no meal and appetizers, but it looks like we do, and I'm very happy about that. So the reason we're here is about a year ago or so, we did a survey, and we said, does anybody want a different type of meeting format? And someone said, yeah, what about a meeting without food? Well, my board was really upset because they love food. So all that beautiful food back there, my board members did that. So give them a round of a hand. They dedicated their time, their money. It was more than I thought. So anyways, I just really appreciate that. But maybe, I don't know. Maybe you say, you know what, I don't need food. I just need to hear what's going on in the world. But anyways, want your feedback in terms of, maybe we mix it up. Maybe we have a couple dinners. Maybe we have some lunches. Maybe we do no food. But it sounds like everybody wants wine. So that's one thing I got to keep in mind. So if you've gone onto our website, and my gosh, we got an uptick on our website when I went in and looked at it. So more people are checking us out, looking at us. It's weird? There was like 3 people in China. And I thought, okay, do we have the government watching us? I'm a little nervous about that. But anyways, our applications to join are online. We haven't raised the price. They're still $40. If you join now, it's still good for the rest of this year and all of next year. We just figured we'd start early so we don't start hounding you guys in January after you've spent all your money on Christmas. So just wanted to let you know, or the holidays. The other thing is we have a couple of open positions on the board. We have a very strong, seasoned board, and they're powerful. But it's always nice to have a few new faces. So if it's on your heart or you're interested in getting involved, we do have a delegate at large and an assistant treasurer. And I can tell you I did the assistant treasurer job a year. I did almost absolutely nothing. But you're a voting member. I mean, like if Janine isn't here to give somebody a check, you might have to give somebody a check or something of that nature. But bottom line, even if you don't want one of those positions, but I'm hoping somebody might be interested in joining, come and see me. Come talk to any of the nominating committee that's here. What are my requirements? What are the benefits? Happy to talk to anybody. And even if you just have like a special skill that you might want to offer and you're like, I don't want to be a board member, but I want to help somehow, please let us know. It would be wonderful. A lot of hands. It would be absolutely wonderful to get some more people. Next year is going to be 250th anniversary of our country. We're hoping to plan a nice event, so always looking for some help there. In fact, somebody said, who did all that food? I'd be happy to bring some food in, so thank you for that. Even something as simple as that can be very, very helpful for us. All right, this is the one thing that I wanted to talk about today as well. We talked about it at one of our meetings. Ranked choice voting is out there right now. And yep, we have these lovely cards for you guys. In fact, you get to take these home and do all sorts of fun things with them. But what is ranked choice voting? Right now, there's people out there that are collecting signatures and probably getting paid to collect signatures for a ballot proposal that's going to be on the ballot in the 2026 election if they get the right number of signatures. And what this does is it implements something called ranked choice voting. And rather than go into all these great details, I want to show you. How many people seen this icon before? Okay, so I'm glad I'm showing it now. So what ranked choice voting is instead of just voting, oh, I know who I want to be governor, you check off your name, you're done. But with ranked choice voting, you're not done. Because now if there's 5 candidates running, you have to rank all of them in order, right? So this is my first choice, this is my second choice, this is my third choice. To me, it's hard enough just to pick one, right? And educate myself on every single candidate. Can you imagine if there's 10 candidates running? And then, or not 10 candidates, excuse me, even 10 positions, and then 10 candidates running for 10 positions. 100 people, really? We're gonna really know that many people? So how this process works is you rank all the candidates, or maybe you're tired and you only rank 2, but you rank all candidates in round 1. They count the votes, right? And you can see candidate C is winning with 35% of the vote, right? Well, nobody got 51%, which is the number you need in order to win the position. So they eliminate the person with the lowest vote, which is candidate E on the right-hand side there. Then they run the votes again. Round 2, right? Looks like candidate C is still winning with 37%, but not 51. So they eliminate candidate B and run the numbers again. Round 3, candidate D falls off, Again, candidate C is still winning. Round 4, oh, finally, someone got 51%. But it wasn't the person that won initially. So the person with the most votes doesn't necessarily always win. Because part of the reason, and that's a false number, that 51%, and the reason it's false is because 27% of the people don't rank all the individuals. So guess what? That's not necessarily 51% of the people. So it's a problem, but it gets better. I'm going to tell you why. Messaging these things are really hard, but I think this is something that we really can message to people, right? So why to say no to ranked choice voting? Well, it's confusing, delays results. Can you imagine doing a hand count? Think about that, doing a hand count, right? It's exhausting. Your ballot could be exhausted because if you don't rank all of them, increased cost, lack of transparency. But I want to point your eyes over to the right-hand side here. This is from the Communist Party USA.org. And the Communist Party supports, look at that, number 4, implemented ranked choice voting. So with all your friends, if you can say, if is ranked choice voting good? Well, it's supported by the Communist Party. So, and I went online and I double-checked that, and that is true. They had a whole article about why it's so important. Okay, ranked choice voting. So we weren't planning a normal meeting, a general meeting. We threw one together back in June because we said we got to get this information out. We had about almost close to 60 people there. And so we do take action. We're not here just to sit and educate. We do take action. In fact, the guy on the right-hand side with the arrow there, sitting behind, where is she? Yeah, he is from he's from Michigan. Vote Michigan, what is it called? Doesn't matter, we just don't want it. It's on his shirt. But anyways, he's the one that's running ranked choice voting on the other side. And he showed up. Honestly, I was a little nervous. I was like, how do you handle this? It worked well. But anyways, he was polite. Anyway, so what we did is our club has invested in these cards, okay? You tell people, do not sign the petition for ranked choice voting. And educate your neighbors, your family members, your kids. Tell them not to sign the petition, but you can use this QR code and you can learn more about it. I'm going to go talk to my local clerk, talk to him about it as well. Try to talk to as many people as you can and take as many cards as you want. I want to see them all gone. I don't want to see any left. There's some out by the front there, but please take 10, 5, 20, whatever you want. Get the information out. And the more we can educate now is better, because if it does end up on the ballot, they'll know it's not a good thing. Okay, petitions. This is another petition going around. I do recommend that you sign this petition. And this is petition for Only Citizens Vote, right? And what this really requires is Only Citizens Vote, requires proof of citizenship for new voters, requires voter ID to vote, and cleans up the voter rolls. So if you're interested in being involved in this, you can see this website if you want to take a picture of it. To get petitions mailed to your home, visit that website and they'll mail them to you. So a little bit of information about this I want to share before I go on, because I was on a conference call today and they were talking about it. They are currently 50 days into collecting signatures out of the 180 days they need, so that you get six months to collect petitions, and they're at 50 days in. They are approaching 100,000 signatures already. So that's wonderful. That is great, great work. They need 446,000 valid signatures, right? But we know you can't turn in 446 valid signatures because the Secretary of State or whoever throws some of them out. So they're targeting 650,000 signatures. So it's a lot of work that's going to be done. Their goal is to get it in first before any ballot initiative for 2026, because theirs will set the tempo, the top, in terms of they'll be the ones that get the attention, right? So a couple of things that I think is important. They're going to be offering more training sessions on how to collect signatures. The more signatures that they don't have to pay saves money, right? They are paying people to collect signatures, so if you're really interested in that, you can do that. They like volunteers. And the reason is because the volunteers do a really good job making sure these forms are filled out right. And rarely do they get thrown out. Once you start getting paid signatures, the ballots sometimes get thrown out. So we need you. some people say, well, why do we do this? It's already in the federal government, right, that only citizens vote. Well, there's some wording that you have to be careful of. I don't know if it's in the state or federal, so excuse me, but sometimes there's a difference between every citizen versus only citizens. And that's the problem. You want the word only citizens vote, not every citizen vote. It's a little bit more specific. And I understand that in some states that courts can grant non-citizens to vote by the way the wording is in the Constitution. So this is why we're doing this. Okay. That's that update. Any questions? I probably can't answer any of them, but that's where they are. They're doing a great job. All right, our next meeting, for those of you that like wine and food, it's going to be back at the Iroquois Club, October 7th. We kind of fell out of our normal sequence for our meetings, and it's because Alex Newman's, I believe, his son or daughter's birthday, so we were trying to accommodate that. So it's a little sooner. We're going to, put 3 weeks from now? 4 weeks? I don't know. It's close. So if you go online, you can register for that. But it should be a great event. Oh my gosh, I'm done almost. Oh, Christy's, she's like, hey, what's going on here? All right, we have a couple of speakers here today. I'm so excited to have everybody. Let me flip over my sheet here. So we have Christy Rogers here today, who is the wife of Mike Rogers. And you guys know Mike Rogers is a Republican running for U.S. Senate in the 2026 election, who is going to succeed retiring Democrat, Senator Gary Peters. So a little bit about Mike. Mike was formerly an Army officer, then an FBI agent, later a Michigan state senator, and from 2001 to 2015, a U.S. representative for the Michigan 8th Congressional District. He did run for U.S. Senate in 2024, narrowly losing to Democrat Alyssa Slotkin in what was one of the closest Senate races in Michigan. So speaking on behalf tonight is Christy Rogers. Yay!
Thanks, Annette. It was actually the closest Senate race in the country. So we lost by 0.3%. I don't recommend that, and we are not going to do that again. So thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm going to make this real quick. Thank you, Annette, for that explanation of ranked choice voting. That was probably one of the better ones that I've heard because you explained it so clearly and simply that we can all go and explain it to somebody else. Just bottom line, it's bad, and the communists like it. So it is actually very dangerous. If you actually look at some of the cities and the cities that have it, it's a disaster. And the candidates that get elected they're worse than a disaster. So no. The other petition, I'm actually a volunteer. I'm not getting paid, but I'm actually going tonight to the Detroit Catholic Central St. Mary's football game, which our nephew plays for. Sadly, I have to dress like this because I forgot my other clothes. But I'm handing out petitions to sign for Only Citizens Vote. So that is also a very, very, very important one. So please sign that if you haven't signed it already and encourage other people to do so. Yes, we are running again. Why? Well, we're crazy. But two, because it is absolutely imperative that we have a Republican senator from Michigan. Yes. We have to. And in my mind, and it's not just because he's my husband, if it was only because he's my husband, we wouldn't be running because it's not easy. But because I put my Michigan citizen hat on and the country's, my U.S. citizen hat on, I say, we need somebody like Mike Rogers to run. We need somebody with his intelligence experience, committee experience. He was chair of the House Intelligence Committee. We need somebody with his national security experience in today's world. We need somebody who cares about Michigan, who cares about education. His dad was a teacher. My mom was a teacher. My mom, retired teacher in Lansing. His dad was a retired teacher at Redford Township. Our nieces, cousins were all teachers. We need to fix education. When Governor Engler, and I know many of you were around when Governor Engler was here, I worked for him. When he was governor, Michigan was in the top 5 in the country in education. Since we have had Democrats, Michigan is now in the bottom 5. Bottom five, 57% of our graduating seniors cannot read past the 8th grade level. That's insane. We are subjecting our kids to a life of poverty or, in many cases, crime. The statistic says that if you cannot read at the 4th grade level by the 4th grade, you have a 70% chance of being in prison or on welfare. Mike knows this. We are both very passionate about it. We are going to help fix it. There's not much you can do at the federal level. There's a lot you can do at the state level. So Mike wants to work with the Republican governor that we are all going to get elected. I don't know who that's going to be, but we absolutely have to have a Republican governor. 100%. When the Democrats have been in control in Michigan, we have gone from the top 5 in manufacturing, in economic prosperity, and in education to the bottom 5 in all of them. And why our fellow citizens continue to vote for Democrats is beyond me. I don't know. So, because they don't have an education, because all this social media. But I got to tell you, if we did not have a wake-up call last week as to what this is really about, then we had a wake-up call. The last election in 24, we thought was the most important that we've seen in our lifetime. And I believe it was. Can you imagine if Kamala Harris was president? Oh, good God. But you need somebody to walk in to be able to talk to President Trump. Mike can do that. Mike's been endorsed twice. We need somebody who can say, okay, Michigan needs this, and walk in and work with President Trump. The other person who beat Mike in the last election can't do that. And she's not been able to do that. We need somebody who can do that for our state. So I'll be around. You'll see me a lot. I'm joining the club. I don't live too far from here. I was just talking to Annette about our church. Trying to talk her to go to St. Patrick's in White Lake. So you'll see me around a lot. I won't speak at every one, but feel free to ask me any questions. If there's something you want us to attend or me to attend, please reach out to Annette, Alyssa, raise your hand. Alyssa, I do this because Alyssa, our press person, is fabulous. We love Alyssa, but Alyssa, our press person, has the name very similar to our opponent last time. So my husband and I call her Hawkeye. So I almost just said Hawkeye, but she's like, oh God, that's that, yeah. So that's our nickname for her because I can't quite say her real name. It's beautiful. It's not spelled the same way, but anyway, so I'll be around. If you have any questions for us, any suggestions, any ideas, please let us know. Work through that. I'm happy to take one question. Sure. I know I spoke too long. One question?
How are you doing on funding?
Repeat the question.
How are we doing on funding? Well, we could always be doing better, right? I wish Mike was here. You could ask him that question. And Hawkeye's going to laugh. Mike has been doing nothing 8 hours a day, but raising money. Sadly, we have to do that nowadays. Sadly, last election, now we were the closest in the country, lost by 0.3%. That's 234 or 284? 232 votes per county in the state of Michigan we lost by. We got outraised 5-1. 5-1. I mean, that's, what was it, like 60 million to 12 million. And so we're doing much better. Now, this race is going to be, if not the #1 Senate race in the country, it's #2. When Mike is calling a lot of national donors now, because we have to, and a lot of donors in Michigan that waited until after the primary to give, which was way too long last time. We already got beaten up enough where we couldn't respond to it, to all the lies. They're all now saying, we had no idea Michigan was winnable. Mike proved that it was. Being outraised 5-1, and we only lost by 0.3%, they're now opening up their checkbooks. And sadly, I mean, they're saying it's going to be a $250 million race. Can you imagine that? Okay, that's a whole nother topic, right? There's so many other things we could do with that money, but it's going much better. It could always be going better, so if you have any suggestions on that one, please let us know, but it's going very well right now. So thank you for that. Awesome. Thank you all for being here and indulging me. Thanks.
Okay. We have a couple of other candidates here today, but before I get started with the ones that are on the agenda, I quickly want to introduce Roman Gasky. Did I say that right? He's running for the 54th district. So Donnie Steele, Representative Donnie Steele is leaving because she's running for a Senate position, and you're running for her open seat. So we will get you on the agenda next time, but thanks for coming. So, all right, next we have Mike Steger, Michigan 11th. He's running for Michigan's 11th Congressional District. Mike has 20 years experience in the private sector in political intelligence. That sounds really cool. And policy development focused on rebuilding our country and ending the forever wars through American industrial strength. 4 years ago, Mike co-founded Promethean Action to continue his effort and to make sure Trump won in 2024. He and his wife have been married for 24 years, and she is the music minister at Old St. Mary's Church in Detroit. He is running for Congress today to make sure we solve the growing crisis within the younger generation and to defend the sacred principles of our nation. So, Mike, come on up.
Thanks, Annette. It's a pleasure to be here, a pleasure to see all of you beautiful and smiling faces. So I can just talk for 5 minutes, but I'd rather hear your questions. Let me just give you a short introduction, maybe provoke some good questions. One, I think we can win the seat. We got to flip 35,000 votes. That means I got to target about 65,000. Right now, for my data guy, we've got 41,331 voters. We know who we're going to target. That means people that would vote Republican if they know Jeremy Moss supports boys going into girls' locker rooms, because Jeremy Moss does support boys having access to girls' locker rooms. He'll be probably the likely Democrat candidate. We can swing 35,000 votes if we have a large enough pool to do it. So that's the work I'm doing right now. How do you do that? You expand the coalition. So my efforts right now have been young people on college campuses. I've been to Oakland, Wayne, had a 5-hour debate last night at Wayne State on is Trump a visionary? And 3 hours of that debate was largely organizing Democrats around the idea of the immortality of the human soul, which they desperately want to have, but if you're a materialist, you don't have. And so really provoked discussions. We can rescue this generation. Charlie proved it. It's true. They need engagement. They need ideas. They have nobody on the campuses presenting anything of the beauty and strength and profoundness of our civilization. It's just not there. Charlie went there and did it. He proved you could get engagement. I believe we can do the same thing, and that's what I've been doing. The other constituency is blue-collar voters. They came out for Trump. They are critical. They're part of this new Republican coalition. And I believe there's enough of them in this district to really actually shift the entire vote coalition. Because I think most of you, I think I've got your vote if I get on the ballot in November. We'll see how the primary goes. I'm running this race to win the general election. Now, let me just tell you a little bit about the campuses, and then maybe you'll have some questions. So like this 5-hour debate last night. Look, you go onto campuses, and the level of questions and discussion is just massive. I was at Michigan State today. Sit there for 2 hours, it's kind of lazy, and then all of a sudden, for like an hour and a half, 2 hours straight, I'm still kind of salty and sweaty from the day, I just have like 15 kids arguing and talking and asking questions. And they are just so curious. They want to know, a big question and for young people, Israel, Gaza. What do you do about, why is Trump a visionary? I have a big sign, Trump is a visionary, prove me wrong. I have a new one that says, prove Charlie right. Dialogue works. And there's a lot of cynical kids on campus, but there's an ability to engage them in that our country is amazing because it defends these principles not just because you want them. Like, you want to have political rights. You want to have individual rights defended by the government. I want them, so that's why we have them. No, I'm sorry. You have them because you have a human soul. You have something unique that makes you made in the image of the Creator. And if you don't recognize that, you won't fight to defend that, then they will be taken away. You will lose them. And they go, wait, that might be true. And there's a kind of engagement and discussion on big ideas. And I think that's what President Trump has introduced. It's time to begin to rebuild civilization. The idea that history ended, that there's no more historical individuals. What was the great famous quote? The last man and the end of history. People ever heard that reference, that book? It was a 1990s book by a guy, a neoconservative, who said, history is over. There's no great individuals anymore. It's the new liberal era. And we don't have any big problems to solve anymore. The Cold War is over, democracy won, and everything's great. And we can sit back, and then the Democrats said, oh, so we're just going to tweak all the social issues we want to tweak. And we're not asking, especially our young men, to say, come and build civilization with us. Come build a nation. Come build our cities. Come rebuild our cities. Detroit is the poorest, most crime-ridden city in the country because we took our manufacturing and industry and we shipped it overseas. We've got to rebuild our country. Trump has given us that opportunity. He's opened that door. I think that's the basis to not just win the seat, but I think it's the basis to save the country. And that's why I'm running for Congress. So I'll shut up there and see if there are any number of questions. Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, since you are going to the colleges, which I think is spot on, every candidate should be hitting those. Surveys coming out are saying 62% of 18 to 29-year-olds, 62% want or like socialism. Any questions for the college campuses about that?
Oh, I mean, well, let me take, so Charlie Kirk did an interview with Tucker Carlson about a month ago. And if you haven't watched it, I encourage you to watch it. It was kind of like a debriefing from Charlie's work on the campuses this last year, especially the last 6 months when Trump had won, and then he was on the campuses. And he describes, he says, if we don't address the crisis of the younger generation, and he said, well, Tucker said, what's the biggest thing you're getting from the campuses? He says, these kids have been mired in a kind of economic system that they see no hope in. And he goes through a number of different things. He says, if we don't effectively address this, and he says we can. We go to the campuses, we address how we're going to bring them into this dynamic. Then we can rebuild and save the country. If we don't, Mamdani is just the beginning. Because what they see is, since 2020, and Michigan is a national median state, the median home price was $300,000 in Michigan and in the nation. Today, it's over $400,000 since 2020. So if you're a young person, you're seeing 30% levels of inflation every 5 years. I didn't think about buying a home when I wasn't thinking about when I was going to buy a home when I was in college. These kids are thinking about it and going, I never will. And I'm not talking some kid who's like, spends some time in school and then spends most of his time in his parents' basement playing video games. I'm talking motivated kids, college Republicans, going to law school, serving at ROTC, or already in the National Guard, and they're like, I'm never going to buy a home. And so the panic and desperation is incredible. So we've got to figure out how we're going to bring prices down, especially on homes. And I mean, there's, I think, some basics we can do there. But we've got to give them a sense that we're going to figure out how we make the American dream available for this coming generation. That's got to be something we discuss publicly. We have fights over it. We have disagreements over it. But we've got to engage them because they're open to it. But all they're hearing is the blanket solution of socialism.
So they think that is the way right now. They are convinced that that is how they can get their first home.
No, they just think it's a way of, I think it's just a thing, they think it's a way of hating a system that seems to hate them.
Okay.
I think it's more that. I don't think they even know.
Yeah, it seems like they don't.
Yeah, it's more what the root of it is this kind of economic anxiety. Do I have time for?
One more question.
Okay, so
So somebody, a good friend of mine told me about this housing crisis, that when we opened the borders under Biden, that let in so many more people, and that put pressure on the lowest level of housing. And I don't hear anybody saying it, but of course that makes sense.
no, it's totally true, and it's not just the last 5 years, it's the last 40, 50 years. And this goes back to the 1970s. I spent a lot of time in California for work, And you see all these old inner city areas with small entry-level post-World War II homes, just like the bungalows in Michigan, and they were all Hispanic, and they were all just complete migration process. So that process has had a huge impact on the country and on housing for a long time. And then, of course, if you get this mass surge, apartments, everything. Look, tariffs and borders raise wages. Tariffs and borders raise wages. That is just part of the equation. You can't have a huge pool of immigration and think your wages aren't going to come crashing down. Kid graduates high school, young man, a roofer pays him 40 or 50 bucks an hour to do tough roofing work for a few years and get winters off. Not a bad deal, but no one's going to pay him 40 bucks an hour if you can get some guy for 15. There's also a problem with just university professors. How many of those are foreign? It's just bizarre. I mean, when I was in school, I couldn't understand a lot of my math professors because they're not native English speakers, they're not from this country, and they're just kind of basically lowering the professors' wages. And then they all say Americans don't like math, and it's like, screw off. But tariffs and borders, Trump is bringing back a manufacturing base. We've got to raise wages. We've got to build more homes. We've got to do it in a way that actually is thoughtful towards entry-level homes. Too many homes are built to then be refinanced, repackaged as part of a financial instrument. We got to build homes that kids really want, like starter homes, build new ones, build communities. We got to think about this. We got to think about building a civilization and building a nation again. History didn't end in 1990 or something. And if we give that message, I think especially the young men, that's what they heard from Charlie. Like, real quick, Charlie said, all these young guys are becoming Catholic. And he said, Tucker said, yeah, why do they want to become Catholic? Because Charlie was evangelical. He said, because they want something that has endured. They want to be part of something that's the course of civilization of 2,000 years. They want to identify with that because they don't want to be part of something that the next day becomes some crazy LGBTQ cult all of a sudden. They want to be part of that dynamic. And I think that's actually what Trump's offering, and that's what I'm running on. So I've overextended my stay.
You're great. No, thank you so much. I feel so badly, like, kicking everybody off, right? So, in fact, I talked to Mike a little bit after this, and I know I'm so mean, so cruel. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. But maybe what we can do in the future down the line is just have more like casual coffees, roundtables, not formal meetings, and we can spend some more time with the candidates just chatting a little bit. So maybe we can set something like that up. So thank you so much. All right, now we have Monica Yatuma, and she is running for, is she here? Oh, there you are. I'm back there. I'm like, she left me. She left me. She's running for Michigan Secretary of State, and she's a devoted wife, mother of 3, and proud first-generation American. Her family fled Iraq in the 70s to search for freedom and opportunity, and she has carried that legacy forward by building a successful statewide business from the ground up. A lifelong Christian and conservative, Monica has been active in grassroots politics at the Oakland County as an Oakland County delegate, member of the executive committee, and the 2024 national delegate as a national delegate. She founded the Great Education Initiative to empower parents to take back local control of their children's education, played a key role in helping Republicans win back the Michigan House in 2024, and has built strong relationships with clerks and voters across the state. Now she's running for Michigan's Secretary of State to restore election integrity, increase transparency, and ensure government serves the people and not the other way around. Monica, come on up.
Thanks, Annette. You made me sound really good. Hi, guys. So, as if I don't already have enough on my plate, I'm now running for Secretary of State, like Annette mentioned. So, as she also mentioned, I run my own business. I've always been an overachiever. So I went to Oakland University, graduated from there. I did that in 3 years. And the reason was because I was in a rush to get to law school, but then I met my husband, and instead I got married. And I went to work for a device company and then left shortly after that. And at 26 years old, I started my own company. And I started a medical waste company. So people look at me and they're like, what, medical waste? And yeah. Another thing people wouldn't guess is I grew up working at my dad's oil change. So I was changing oil in cars growing up. So people look at me and they're like, what? No, yeah. I'm not as bougie as everybody thinks. So I started a medical waste company. We now operate across the entire state. So we've got several drivers, several hundred clients. And I can tell you guys, running my own business, it's taught me how to fix inefficiencies, manage people, prevent and detect fraud. But most importantly, compliance is a top priority in our business, especially because I have to protect ourselves and protect our clients. We're constantly having to answer to OSHA and Laura. And what's frustrating about that is that our state, local, and federal officials, they're not held to the same standards. Perfect example of that is the Secretary of State's office right now. We're getting zero compliance. So just a little bit about what I've done. So 2020 was really when I ramped up my political engagement because I was super frustrated with what happened during the election in Detroit. And then in 2022, I was very frustrated during COVID with the masking, with the mandates and the lockdowns. I actually led the charge for Oakland County, filed a lawsuit to have the mask mandate dropped. It was successful, and the rest of the counties in in Michigan followed. So during that year when everything turned blue, Great Education Initiative, which is what I started in 2022, we took the majority of our school board races. And the reason I started it was because when the Democrats took the trifecta in 22, I knew in my heart that they were going to come for the kids and in the schools. And while somebody like me might have access to legal resources and financial resources, your average family across the state of Michigan doesn't have that. So I took the attorneys that we used, that we filed the lawsuit with, and we started GEI, and we started helping families across the state. I focused on school board races because the GOP was not going to focus there, and that's because there's just no money in school board races. And honestly, the consultants don't want to touch them. And so I took that on. I went out and I raised money to help these parents, and it was really to take back control of their child's education. Now, fast forward in 24, we ran a highly sophisticated early absentee vote operation. We did that actually with Charlie and with Turning Point. That was a contract I worked really hard to land. And so we did that to help Republicans take back the state house. But during that process, I worked with clerks across the state, and we pulled data directly from those clerks, and we built relationships with them. But what I really saw was the flaws in Michigan's election system. We saw things like missing and inconsistent, ballot tracking numbers, ballot ID numbers, and we even had missing return dates for absentee voter ballots. And if you know anything about running a chase operation, which is what we were doing, it's really difficult to do that. So what that did is it gave me the insight about what needed to be addressed and fixed with our election system. So in 24, like Annette mentioned, we worked really hard to help Republicans take back the Michigan State House. And that wouldn't have been possible without the necessary fundraising skills or relationship building skills, because in a year I was able to go out and raise $1 million and build a powerful national donor network. And so we went on to take the state house. But also, I'm Chaldean, for those of you that don't already know. Unfortunately, although Chaldeans are conservative, they don't tend to vote. We have a low voter turnout. So that was one of the projects I focused on. And so we took voter turnout in the Chaldean community from 32% during the 24 election to 74%. I had people stationed in churches and community centers all over the state where there was a lot of Chaldeans. We were registering them to vote. We were hiring people to knock on doors, chase ballots, make phone calls. We were doing everything. And I did this because while I started protecting families and children, this started taking me towards election integrity, and that's how I landed here, and I knew that that was important. And so I realized something really important in doing all this work, and that was that I can't keep doing all this, going out there and raising all this money and doing all this work if we don't secure our elections. And so that's why I decided to run for Secretary of State. And for the sake of time, I won't get into heavy detail, but I'll tell you what I want to focus on getting in. First and foremost, cleaning up the qualified voter file. Second, securing absentee ballots, because honestly, they should be treated like evidence in a courtroom, sealed, logged, tracked, and verified at every single handoff. We need to ensure signature verification on every single absentee ballot. And if we can do those things, we can protect voter access and election integrity. But also, for any of you that work elections, I want to create a poll challenger Bill of Rights and a campaign observer Bill of Rights, really to establish the necessary protections for poll challengers and campaign observers, and to ensure accountability to all elections moving forward, and to increase transparency, but to protect you guys just based on what happened in 2020. But I want to further increase that transparency by giving anybody who wants it access to election data and government processes, because you have a right to that. So that means no more heavily redacted or outrageously priced FOIAs. We also need to tackle Michigan's current finance reporting system, which is now called Mitten. It's a mess. It's a waste of $9 million taxpayer dollars. So we're going to replace it with something more user-friendly, something more transparent, and a program that actually works, or a platform that actually works. And we'll increase accessibility in SOS offices, so more access to online tools, more access to same-day appointments. And in the more rural areas, say where we have Amish families that don't have access to phones or electronics, maybe more kiosks or a mobile unit for them to make sure we can get them registered to vote and get them what they need. We'll also streamline SOS transactions, so when you guys are going to the office, you're making one trip, not 4, not 5, not 6, because you forgot something or they forgot to tell you what to bring. We'll make sure that's cleaned up for you guys. But most importantly, as your next Secretary of State, I'm gonna make sure that all instructions given to election officials, including our clerks, are lawful, not unlawful, like what we're seeing right now with Jocelyn Benson. So that's all I've got for you. It's super simple, folks. I'm running to restore transparency, integrity, and trust back into our elections, back into our Secretary of State's office. I hope to earn your support along the way. Together, I'm hoping we can secure our elections and protect Michigan's future.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Okay, wow, that sounds like a lot going on there. A lot of I'm exhausted. All right, so I'm gonna. No, you did great. No, that's just me. Don't take it personally. All right. So while I just had to get your picture up there. Just move that real quickly. There you go. This is our keynote speaker. Now, as he knows, I gave him permission to start changing on my computer while I was giving his introduction, so I'm not offended. But yes, it's authorized. But I just wanted to let you know you can start. So. All right, Pat Colbeck is an American engineer, author, and statesman. He's a former Michigan State Senator who represented communities in Wayne County and served as a member of the Senate Republican Caucus leadership team. Patrick Colbeck is widely recognized as one of Michigan's top election integrity experts. Is he an expert at sending this up? We'll see if he finishes it by the time I'm done. He's an accomplished aerospace engineer, certified Microsoft small business specialist, and successful small business owner. A frequent guest on national television and radio program, he continues to investigate what happened in the 2020 election and what needs to be done to secure future elections. He brought with him his most recent book, The 2020 Coup, What Happened and What Do We Do? Additionally, in 2023, he was hired by Mike Lindell to serve as his chief operating officer for Lindell Management, tasked with implementing the plan to secure the 2024 election. It is with great pleasure I give you a Michigan treasure, Pat Colbeck. Hey, you did it! I'm so proud of you. Here's Pat.
Crash in the next few seconds here, but anyway, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for coming out here, and thank you for all the candidates willing to run for office. It's not easy, and they need all the support that they can get. There's a lot of territory to cover today. 2 days ago, I was out in Grosse Pointe Farm. Can I speak without the mic? Is that all right? Can you guys hear me? All right. If I need to, we'll turn it off. 2 days ago, I was out in Grosse Pointe, and I focused on state-specific concerns around the security of our elections. Today, I want to focus on what's happening at the federal level, the national level. So if you want to know about state stuff, more than happy to talk about it, but the focus of tonight was going to be what's going on at the federal level, because frankly, particularly in Michigan, that's where we're getting the most traction. The state, unfortunately, is compromised beyond comprehension here. We do have one bright spot. That's the Michigan House. Thank you, Monica, for making sure that we had a majority out in the Michigan House, and the people that are out there are actually doing great work. So they're not just taking up space. It's good stuff. But today, I want to focus on national stuff, and I can't focus on national stuff, frankly, before let's see here, before my mouse doesn't want to pay attention to it.
Do you have to hook up to this? Like do you have to,
No.
I have mine, no?
No, that's actually.
You're the engineer.
Right. They're probably just ignoring me now.
Sure.
Yeah. I swear I checked this out right beforehand. This is why we need to get rid of all electronic voting systems. You know what? There's a manual override here. There wasn't
Wait,
any.
should I?
Oh, the issue is that, no, it's locked up because of the HDMI. All right, guys. So, in conclusion, yeah, usually sometimes it gets to be a crosstalk between the two, all the different devices that are out there.
What about this? Let me get in front of this one. I don't know if there's anything to do with that. Just get
Oh, maybe it's interference.
Maybe.
No, it's just locking up on my computer.
Oh, there it goes. There it is. It's moving.
All right, so
back.
there we go. It goes a lot faster that way, right?
Yep.
Now you guys have seen the whole presentation. All right, guys. So I want to start off addressing what's going on with Charlie. And I want to make sure everybody understands the big picture of what's going on here. This literally is a case of good versus evil. When Mike was talking about the fact that this has been going on for years, decades. Yeah, it's been going on for decades. And how many people here have heard of this guy here? All right.
Oh, yeah.
Let me see if it's working now for me. Yes, it is. What do you know? That was just a crosstalk issue. So, this guy dedicated his book, Rules for Radicals, to Lucifer. So if you're wondering why it seems to be this battle for good versus evil here, well, that's what the people that are trying to destroy our country from within right now, this is their leader. And this is one of their key tenets of his strategy, is that the real action is in the reaction. That's very important for everybody to understand, particularly in the wake of what happened last week. They know that good people, good Americans that follow the law, that believe in the Bible, that go off and just try to make life better for everybody around them, they're not going to do anything that is lawless. They're not going to do anything that's bad. They're not going to do anything that harms fellow human beings or fellow Americans unless they're poked and prodded. And that's what these guys are trying to do right now, across the board. They're poking and prodding, and they want us to act. And so I want to make sure I highlighted this because you need to know your enemy, right? And there's no better way of realizing who our enemy is than to realize which side of this divide you want to be on. Do you want to be on the side that hates America? Because when they protest stuff that they're upset about, they burn down cities. When we're upset, we go hold prayer vigils. And there's a huge difference. And so I had to put that out there. You know, I was actually on air with Mike Lindell on his show when we got the announcement that Charlie Kirk had been shot. And then I had to host Mike's show the next day talking about it. And I've been at a lot of Turning Point events. I've met Charlie Kirk, and the key thing is that he was not afraid to have the dialogue. And Mike Steiger was running. I love the fact that he's going into the universities. I can tell you when I was in the Michigan Senate, I got right in the middle of all these debates around social studies, and I filed some issues with the Michigan Department of Education. I said, guys, you're trying to brainwash our kids with these standards. I'm not going to stand for it. And they invited me, to their credit, to serve on a focus group and to go off and define the next set of standards. And I'll tell you, I had two requirements for serving on that focus group. Number one, whatever we came up with had to be politically neutral. And number two, it had to be accurate. And you know what? I won on all 15 points because the folks that we're fighting against, these university professors, these people with a lot of letters after their name, they don't know why they believe what they believe. They don't know. And they're teaching our next generation of kids. So do not be fearful going up against these folks. They don't know what the heck they're talking about. That's why Charlie was such a threat to these guys. Because he not only knew what he believed, but he knew why he believed it. And when you know that, you can defend it. All right, that's the challenge ahead of us here, guys. So there's a lot going on. So I want to start off tonight by saying, guys, just because Trump won doesn't mean we have election integrity. He literally did make it too big to rig. And just as evidence of that, look down ballot. And I would submit that Mike Rogers had a very high likelihood of actually winning that particular election back in 2024. And I would also submit that if it wasn't for a bunch of meddling kids that were monitoring the Daily Ballots cast report here in the state of Michigan, where they identified that Jocelyn Benson was trying to push through 125,428 illegal votes during the election, President Trump would have lost. So we've got some heroes out there. They're known as database administrators, but They actually monitored this and got it out. Folks from the Election Integrity Force, folks from Check My Vote, and Deep, they're all really good folks and they're doing good work. Now, just so you guys know, we're going to have justice for 2020. And a lot of people say, just give it a rest, Colbeck. Focus on the future elections. I'm going to talk about the future election. We are focusing on the future election. But until you get justice for what happened in 2020, that's the issue. We got all kinds of laws on the book. We're just not enforcing them. And just to show you what we're up against right now in the state of Michigan, particularly going into the 2026 election, our current chief election official in the state, Jocelyn Benson, I call her Jocelyn, we will come for you, Benson, because of how she threatens boards of canvassers all across the state. Current Secretary of State actually had her own attorney in the O'Halloran v. Benson case during testimony before the Michigan Court of Appeals stated boldly and arrogantly that Benson only follows the laws that she agrees with, and if you don't like that, you can just sue her. Literally. Well, you know, we have sued her, and we've won in 7 separate court decisions. So when Monica was talking about making sure we start issuing lawful decisions, that's why we're doing it. It's because she is literally has no regard for the law, and and we're not talking state issues here today. But I also want to point out, you guys know that she actually gave an 82 in order to stem this loss of court battles, where she's lost 7 in a row. She decided to go off and increase her chances of winning at the Michigan Supreme Court by issuing an $82,500 donation to Justice Kyra H. Bolden while she was a defendant on a case before the Michigan Supreme Court. And then Justice Bolden just so happened to write the majority opinion in Benson's favor that overturned previously unanimous decision against Benson. That's what's going on here in the state. So if you're wondering why I don't have too much hope about the jurisprudence process here in Michigan, that's why. But we have friends up in DC. And what I want to highlight is that what was the number one set of questions, or line of questions, are for Pam Bondi during her test before the Senate for her hearings, nomination hearings. What? Confirmation. Yeah, the confirmation hearings. Yeah. It was the 2020 election. You had good old Adam Schiff going up and grilling her on, are you going to go off and investigate the 2020 election? Yeah, well, I don't know if you guys know this or not. President Trump has a picture of his mugshot outside the Oval Office. He knows what happens if we don't go off and address these thugs and what they did in the 2020 election. So I can tell you personally, as somebody who's gotten materials directly to the president on the 2020 election, that they are actively working on the recommendations that we're making. Matter of fact, I think President Trump's checked the box on about half the recommendations we've had. It may not be in headlines, it may be not talked about in the media or anything like that. You may not even see the keyword elections, but I can tell you it's happening. And I know we're all anxious for indictments. I don't want to see indictments, I really do. But I'm telling you, we got to wait a little bit more because they're casting a pretty wide net right now. All right, so just to frame everything for the rest of the presentation, I just want to make sure everybody understands how the evidence suggests that our elections are being stolen right here in Michigan using evidence. This is evidence I talk about in my book, The 2022. All the stuff that I talked about then, it hasn't been disproven. Matter of fact, it's got even more compelling with age, which is always a good sign that you're on the right side with that. So I break it down in how the elections are stolen in 4 basic phases. Number 1 is preparation phase. In preparation phase, the objective is to create and expand weaknesses in our current election system. Can you say mail-in voting? That is a number 1 weakness, and even Jimmy Carter says that. That's where we have evidence in a memo that was sent by former Michigan Secretary of State Ruth Johnson, who's now currently a state senator. She had sent an internal memo to the Republican caucus that said that Benson had seeded over 800,000 illegal voters into the absentee ballot, into the qualified voter file prior to the 2020 election. And she wanted an audit of it, to Ruth's credit. She wanted to get an audit, and they didn't do an audit. Also, the use of these machines. I had a nice little conversation with Martin Brooke right before there was the Bloomfield Township clerk. And of course, he's not buying into any discussions around machines and stuff, but he did open the door to come in and talk to him in his office about the integrity of the elections here in Bloomfield Township. I will take him up on that. And anybody interested in joining me, let me know. So this preparation phase, essentially these machines allow you to centralize the management of election theft. And as a certified Microsoft small business specialist, guys, there's a lot we don't know about how these machines are used, or a lot the general public doesn't know. I'll just give you one quick example. You see that picture that's up there? That picture is of the motherboard of an ES&S DS200 machine. That is the motherboard inside of there, and that big little chip on the left side there, that is a 4G wireless modem. How many clerks do you know of that are smart enough to open up the chassis on these machines, risk being thrown in jail by Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel for peeking where she's not supposed to peek, and then knowing enough about computer hardware architecture that she can identify that as a 4G wireless modem? They're told that these systems are air-gapped. ES&S in particular has been proven to be lying in that context, and they've got reports out for the Election Assistance Commission to that effect where they're told to stop it and to start telling the truth. Dominion CEO John Polis has been caught committing at least 15 counts of perjury in its December 15, 2020 testimony before the Michigan Senate. And no prosecutions, no investigations. When we filed a complaint with the Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, she said, sorry, we conducted a thorough investigation of your 51-page complaint, complete with evidence, in 5 business days, and there's nothing to report and no reason to go out and investigate. So I did a FOIA request afterwards. I said, I want to see your report. Oh, sorry, we didn't do a report. I go, well, then I want to see your communications that were part of this thorough investigation. Said, oh no, well, the only communication she had dealt with how to respond to the criminal complaint. Nothing was done on the investigation. That's fraud, and that's willful neglect of duty. And oh, by the way, we got a criminal complaint filed against her with the federal government now too. So that's the preparation phase. Here's the main attack vector for fraudulent elections. It's mail-in voting, and prime example of this is how they abuse the mail-in voting process in Hamtramck. How many of you guys have been digging into what's been happening out there? All right, so Dana Nessel's actually prosecuting there because it's a dem-on-dem battle. It's the LGBTQ community versus the Muslim community in Hamtramck, and guess which side Dana Nessel's on, and guess who she prosecuted? Dana Nessel's on the LGBTQ side. She prosecuted 2 Muslim members of the Hamtramck City Council for fraud, things that everybody has known that's been happening for years. Yet we're being led to believe that it only happens in Democrat primaries. Right? They're talking about bullying, new immigrants and newly minted American citizens into handing over their absentee ballots. They have these candidate parties where the candidates actually fill in the ballots for themselves to go off and, all the stuff that we know has been happening. And a Project Veritas undercover video actually proved it, and we had Democrat officials going off and asserting that. So, guys, so a mail-in ballot, how do we know that there's issues with mail-in voting here in the state of Michigan? I was talking to the clerk here, and he goes, I could see it onesie, twosie, there's a little bit of problems. Well, okay. If you go up by statute, MCL 168-509Q requires that the voter history is supposed to be maintained in the Michigan Qualified Voter File, which is our voter registration database, for a period of no less than 5 years, which means we're still under that blanket. And by the way, that data is supposed to be uploaded into the Qualified Voter File within 7 days of the election. If you go off and actually ask for the Qualified Voter File and get a list of the people who voted in the 2020 election, there are over 353,000 fewer voters listed in there for the 2020 election than ballots cast in an election decided reportedly by 154,188. Gee, I think that's significant enough to maybe do some investigation, don't you? Yeah. All right, so that's the kind of games that are being played. Canvassing helps do that, figure that out as well. But tell you what, mail-in voting only works if you predict accurately the voter turnout for that election. And they fell short in the 2020 election. They predicted 145 million people would vote nationally, 160 million came out. And so when that happens, you have to go to a backup plan. And the backup plan involves these pesky little machines that don't advance when you start your presentation. So, and just quick evidence of that. happening is that there's a election results aggregation service known as Edison Research. So if you're wondering where all the news agencies get their data for the elections, they get it from two places. One is Associated Press, the other is Edison Research. Edison Research, when you actually look at the data that they were sharing with the New York Times on election night, you found out that they had this real interesting curve where the cumulative vote tally for each candidate would go up and up and up, and then all of a sudden, it dropped down to zero. In Michigan, it happened at 5 o'clock in the morning, but it happened in all the states across America at different times throughout the evening. Why is that important? You know, in addition to being a certified Microsoft Small Business Specialist, I'm also an aerospace engineer. I've done control system analysis and design, and I know a lot of fellow engineers. And we were talking, and Draza Smith pointed me out to the fact that looks a heck of a lot like what happens when you adjust the set point on a digital controller known as a PID controller. So that's an indication that somebody was messing with the vote results. Well, if you mess with the vote results, well, then you got to update the ballots, right? You got to go off and update the ballot count, because if somebody does a recount, you got to make sure that the number of votes cast actually corresponds with the number of ballots. Well, guess what happened at 3:30 in the morning, and I was there to see it. That's when that van came up to the back of the TCS Center and delivered tens of thousands of ballots with zero chain of custody. They could have come from Timbuktu for all we know. But in light of the constituency of Hamtramck, they probably came from Bangladesh. So when that happens, that's there to go off and update the ballot. Now, okay, now you got the number of ballots corresponding with the vote tally. Well, what else do you need? Well, you need to make sure that the poll book says that you got the number of voters equal to the number of ballots, right? So guess what happened 13 days after the election and 1 day before Wayne County Board of Canvassers was set to go off and vote on whether or not to certify the election. A little black box came in, and we had alert meddling kid poll challengers monitoring these activities, and they said, hey, Gina, my friend Gina Newsy said, what's in that black box? And they go, oh, these are new poll books. Really? New poll books. 13 days after the election and 6 days after you're statutorily required to upload all the people who voted in the election into the QDF. He goes, yes. Well, talking to one of the late Board of Canvasser members, Bill Hartman, he stated that prior to receiving this little black box, we had precincts in the city of Detroit that were out of balance by as many as 600 votes. And just, you know, roughly 1,000, 1,200 or whatever is kind of a reasonable turnout for a given precinct. So almost half, if maybe even more than half of the voters here, it didn't balance, if you know what I mean. So it means that the number of ballots cast did not equal the number of voters. That's an issue. Well, after the little black box came in, maximum out of balance was 29 votes, which is still too high, but by Detroit standards, I mean, they actually improved in their number of out of balance precincts from the primary from 72% out of balance to 71% in the general election. So they were doing a really good job. All right, so there's ample evidence of this kind of gamesmanship being played in the city of Detroit. And then last but not least is the defense phase. And in the defense phase, I want to move this forward a little bit, see if that helps a little bit. In the defense phase, the primary purpose of the defense phase is just to make sure you can't talk about the other three phases. That's why they've done the lawfare. That's why they've attacked Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and my friend Mike Lindell. That's what's happening. I'm going to show you tonight some evidence that they were actually planning on doing that before the election. All right, but here's the good news. January 19th, Catherine Herridge, who's one of the few reporters, national reporters I still respect, and she took this photo out at Guantanamo Bay, and she made sure that the words Camp Justice were featured prominently. Also, President Trump recently went off and this is how he makes all the news. He puts it out on Truth Social. He highlighted that he's calling for a special prosecutor in the 2020 election. And we do know right now that there are active grand juries in place in states like Florida right now that are tied to many different issues, including the grand conspiracy that we're going to talk about in a sec, but also to the 2020 election. All right, so, and here's one of the truths that President Trump put out, because everything I've talked about so far is focused on getting 2020 right and understanding how they stole the election. Now we're going to talk about something that I hope gives you a little bit of hope, and that is efforts that are being taken right now to go off and secure the 2026 election. President Trump put out a very lengthy truth that essentially summarized into he's going to lead a movement to get rid of mail-in voting and get rid of the machines. All right, and guys, I'm not a technophobe. I'm not a Luddite. I'm a certified Microsoft. I'm a techie. I'm an aerospace engineer. I like computer equipment. I don't trust them though, particularly in the hands of people who don't know what the heck they're talking about and don't know what they're doing with it, because there are 6 ways of Sunday to go off and subvert the integrity of these systems and nobody will ever know it. So I'm 100% behind him on this. And before tonight's over, I hope you'll join me in that. And I'm just going to highlight some things you may not know about mail-in voting systems that I think are pretty important. First of all, how many have heard of this company, Blue Crest? I think they bought up Pitney Bowes a while back. This is important because this is how mail-in voting works in communities like the city of Detroit. I call this a ballot factory in a box. And you're going to see why in just a second.
Vote by mail is on the rise. The demand for mail ballots has never been greater. Bluecrest ReliaVote solutions accurately assemble and track mail ballots, essential for integrity of voting by mail. Let's look at ReliaVote's closed-loop process. ReliaVote software leverages a one-to-one ballot preparation process to ensure integrity and provide an audit trail. It securely interfaces with the voter registration system and file to access the unique voter and ballot identifiers. A barcode is assigned to each ballot type and each ballot package to ensure accuracy. It also assigns unique USPS Intelligent Mail Barcode, or IMB, for tracking. ReliaVote printing solutions feature high-quality color inkjet to produce ballots along with other election materials. Ballots are fed into a inserter system. File-based processing ensures ballots are accurately assembled. The voter address and unique IMB is printed on each outbound envelope, while the return envelope is printed with election information along with the unique IMB. To optimize postage discounts, the outbound envelopes are pre-sorted. The sorter scans an image of each ballot packet and the IMB. The outgoing mail ballot packets are tracked through the USPS using the IMB, providing security and transparency. The IMB on the return ballot allows it to be tracked back to the election official. The return ballot envelope is validated by scanning the voter identification and signature and matching it to the voter signature in the voter registration database. The sorter prints a date and timestamp and opens a return ballot envelope as it sorts them by precinct, district, or batches so they are ready for tabulation. ReliaVote software updates the voter registration system to indicate the ballot was received to avoid any duplication. ReliaVote. Proven, trusted, secure.
They are not proven, they are not trusted, and they are not secure. All it takes is one person behind the scenes understanding how to use that kind of system to create as many ballots as they want in favor of whatever candidate that they want. Because when you're able to print ballots, what's to keep you from printing ballots with the circles and the ovals filled in already for their favorite candidate? That's why you need to be able to look at these ballots and see if it was machine completed or whether or not it's hand completed or anything else. They won't let us take a peek at how they set this up in the city of Detroit. We had people that were looking into this big time. Because simple things like, what are your signature verification settings? Because if you're letting everything through, then that's not signature verification. That's just some rubber stamp on fraudulent ballot inserts. So guys, technology is taking over this space at a point where that Hamtramck model we were talking about before, okay, that's old school a little bit. New school, what they do is they use systems like this, and it sets it up so that you really only need one person who knows how the system operates, and they can go off and subvert the whole system. So you don't have the inconvenience of Democrats having to turn on Democrats in a Project Veritas undercover video. All right, so let's just summarize some of the key problems with this, and it's a common facet with all mail-in voting processes that are out there. Number one, they're tied in. This non-government organization known as Blue Crest is connected to our Michigan State Qualified Voter File. Non-government organizations are not subject to FOIA requests. We don't know what's going on behind the curtain here in Wizard of Oz land, and they know that. And if you go off and try to peek behind the curtain, guess what happens? you get indicted by our good old Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel for trying to throw the election when all we're really trying to do is validate whether or not the election was conducted with integrity. Like I said, they do the ballot printing, ballot envelope printing. It's literally a one-stop shopping center for mail-in ballot fraud. All right, so this guy's name is Tom Scott, and now we're going to switch over to the voting machine being a bad idea. Now, I can talk about all the different vulnerabilities that are out there, but I'll tell you, this guy makes so much sense with the way he portrays it that I'm going to bow to the way he communicates it, because he does it so much better than this stupid engineer does on that particular topic. And since he's got a British accent, he sounds a heck of a lot smarter than that.
After Hurricane Sandy in 2012, election officials in some parts of America decided that they would allow emergency electronic voting from home. You would download a ballot paper, fill it out, and then email or fax it back to them. And yes, some people still fax. This was a terrible idea, and here's why. Physical voting is centuries old. In that time, pretty much every conceivable method of fraud has been tried and has since been defended against. Because of that, attacks on physical voting don't scale well. It takes so much effort, so many people, and it only takes one person to leak your conspiracy and the whole thing falls apart. But electronic voting, you can attack with one person. And it can take about the same effort to change one vote as it does to change a million, and it can be done without even setting foot in the country whose elections you're trying to rig. There are two key parts of an election. First, anonymity. You cannot let anyone pay or bribe in order to change someone's vote or threaten them. If you put any identifying mark on your paper ballot, if you sign it, put your name on it, put a number on, anything that could, in theory, be used to check how you voted, then your vote is thrown out, just so no one can be forced or bribed to vote a certain way. And yet, because you marked your vote and you put it into a sealed box, and that box was only unsealed when it was surrounded by everyone with a stake in the election, you know that your vote has still been counted, even though you will never see it again. That's the other key, trust, or a complete lack of it. You never, ever, ever trust any one individual. Ideally, you don't trust any two or three. People can be bribed, can be threatened, can be incompetent. I mean, hell, people have been all three of those things at the same time. But like I said, the more physical votes you want to change, the more people it takes and the less possible your attack gets. Everyone can see what's happening and they can keep an eye on each other, particularly if they don't trust the despicable people on the other side. So, let's talk about voting machines. Problem number one, auditing the software and hardware. Because in theory, you could have open source software that everyone has checked and everyone is happy with and that's been used for years, in theory. Never mind that you only actually do a full-scale test of this software every few years when there's actually an election. Let's say, theoretically, it can be done. How do you make sure that that software is what's actually loaded on that voting machine in front of you on the day of the election? And I know that immediately someone is going to want to comment about checksums or crypto, which is great, except now you have to trust the software that's checking that hash, or more likely the one person who is checking it for you. You have just moved the problem. And if you're thinking right now, it's fine, I could verify that, then turn your brain the other way and think, how could I break that? Because there are trillions of dollars, it's not an exaggeration, trillions riding on the result of big elections, and that is an incredible motivation. If you're coming up with sneaky ways to get around it, believe me, so are lots of other people. Now, it might be one angry techie, but it might be an entire political party, or the huge corporations who want one party to win, or entire nation states who want one party to win. And all that is assuming that you are even allowed to verify the software that's running, which you never are, because plugging unknown USB sticks into a voting machine is a bad idea. Not that that stops people plugging unknown USB sticks into a voting machine, it has literally happened. Let's remember, these machines have to be left in a room with the voter and no one else in order for the voter to cast their vote anonymously. Oh, and by the way, the machines are frequently programmed by sticking a USB into each of them in turn, so if you compromise the first one, jackpot. In practice, you don't have open source software, you have proprietary, unaudited software, which you just have to trust. This is real, by the way, around the world. There are some elections that run on this. And remember what I said, this is an election. You don't trust. And maybe you're thinking, okay, you can have an audit trail, you can have a paper backup that the machine prints out as you vote, in which case, congratulations, you have just invented the world's most expensive pencil. One of the reasons Britain gives people pencils for voting, by the way, is because we're worried that pens might be switched by any voter to contain disappearing ink. It might be an urban legend, sure, but if you want to do something like that, then erasing pencils, way more difficult than just putting disappearing ink in there. Might be an urban legend, might be a plausible attack vector. That's the level of paranoia we're working at here. And if you think that you can get away with all this by using a pile of paper ballots and just counting them electronically, an electronic counting machine is still a black box that a pile of ballots goes into and a mysterious number comes out of. They've got exactly the same problems. Problem number 2. Votes in transit. There are 3 ways of moving the magic electronic ballot numbers from the voting machines to the final count. You could treat the machine like a regular ballot box, seal it in a plastic bag, move the physical machine with 2 people inside the vehicle to the count, and then you unseal it there. No one does this. You could copy the result onto a handy USB stick and move the USB stick instead. Do I need to run through how easily? No, okay, obviously I don't. Or, and this is what usually happens, you could tell the voting machine to upload the results over the internet, optionally through a third-party central server, probably not over a secure connection, and probably without any checksums or tests. Problem number 3. The central count program. Right at the end, there is the program that takes all these numbers, all these votes, and produces a final count. So now you have all the same problems that you have with the individual voting machines, except now only a few people can even see that computer, and it's been hidden away in a private warehouse somewhere for the last few years. So, good luck verifying that. And all this is before we even talk about online voting. You could talk about all the ways you could hijack ballots, you could compromise computers, you could block an email address, because after Hurricane Sandy, the ballots were sent by email. Any of the ways you could do a man-in-the-middle attack on any of that. All possible, all entirely possible. And those are just if it's a well-designed system. There are reports of actual live elections where there are cross-site scripting attacks in the e-voting page, where they misspelled one party's name, where they put the wrong party's logo next to a candidate. Sorry, did I say elections? I meant election. That was all the same election, and it was one of the trials in Hampshire in 2007. But never mind all that. Depending on which security company you believe, somewhere between 5% and 50% of desktop computers around the world are infected with something. That's just the scammers trying to set up botnets and minor extortions on private computers. If you want to affect a load of votes, try infecting the computers at the public library. But never mind that! Because we've seen what some big scary countries and big scary corporations can do when they put their mind to it. Given that someone designed an immensely complicated worm that spread around the world just to break some Iranian centrifuges, imagine what someone could do if they wanted to throw an online election. Remember, when you hear just trust us or just trust me or it's a computer, it doesn't go wrong in an election, something has already gone disastrously wrong. Imagine all this electronic voting only without computers. Would you be happy walking up to someone anonymous in a ballot box, or worse, just calling someone on your phone, telling them your vote, but they promise to keep it secret? And at the end of the election, all those people who have been sitting on their own phone up one other person in private and tell their results. And then that final person who promises to count it all up accurately just announces who's won. Because that is essentially what electronic voting is. It is a terrible idea. And if a government ever promises to use it, hope they don't manage it before you get a chance to vote them out.
Well, that's the problem with filming
Yeah.
in a big city, mate.
Because you can hear Rattly McRattleson and his massive tray of whatever it is moving. Between that and the bagpiper and the sirens, we're filmed in front of a clock. There's going to be some pedant who is going to run through this and work out how many takes we've done and what order they were in. And how many times I had to repeat that bit where I got really flustered.
Well, the bit where the audio's all distorted.
Yeah. Never mind the fact that I started with slightly damp hair and I've ended with kind of Belinda Carlisle going on here.
Machines are bad. Yes. And this is coming from somebody who loves the efficiency of machines. I love it on paper, but in practice, I've done more than, I worked on a space station. We had to certify critical components for a life support system. That's what I worked on. The diligence, the due diligence that goes into making sure that that configuration that we're sending up into the spacecraft that astronauts' lives are going to depend on is orders of magnitude beyond what is done for the systems that determine who the leader of the free world is going to be. And I'm just going to leave that there. Bottom line, complete lack of transparency. When you try to get transparency, you get indicted and thrown in jail. Just like my friend Tina Peters, who's been put in prison for 9 years for trying to secure the elections as a clerk. On the bright spot, we know that the federal government gets it. We know that they're getting the information that we've shared up there. We know that they understand what the problem is now. And as evidence of this, remember what Tulsi Gabbard said after a cabinet meeting a while back.
I've got a long list of things that we're investigating. We have the best of the best going after this. Election integrity being one of them. We have evidence of how these electronic voting systems have been vulnerable to hackers for a very long time and vulnerable to exploitation to manipulate the results of the votes being cast, which further drives forward your mandate to bring about paper ballots across the country so that voters can have faith in the integrity of our elections.
They got the memo. And there's much more coming where that came from. So, stay. What's being done? Day one, President Trump spent a lot of time doing executive orders. You guys remember that? He did it very publicly, by the way, too. Notice that? He was doing that in front of like tens of thousands of people at the arena. He was doing it in front of the reporters. You can't accuse him of using an auto pen for these executive orders. Well, here's some of the executive orders he put out. And these relate directly or indirectly to election integrity, even though they don't have the keyword elections in them. Designating cartels and other organizations as foreign terrorist organizations. I'm going to show why that's important a little bit. I'll give you a little bit of clue. Do you know why we have 3 guided missile destroyers sitting off the coast of Venezuela right now? Also, ending radical and wasteful DEI programs. You're going to see why that's important just a little bit. And there's a whole bunch of other items here that in the interest of time. Suffice to say, go read some of the president's executive orders from day one, and you're going to find that if you understand how our elections are being stolen, a lot of what is happening in these executive orders is essentially cutting them off at the knees behind the surface without using the keyword elections. So be encouraged. So he's also done executive orders after that on foreign contributions. So, you know, it's a little known loophole, at least on our side, that foreign governments can actually contribute to initiatives like ranked choice voting initiatives that are out there. Because it's not, the only prohibitions are against financing candidates. It's not against financing initiatives. So I don't know if anybody's done the analysis on where the money's coming from ranked choice voting, but I bet you some of it's coming from overseas. One of the best executive orders that President Trump did back on March 25th of this year, and it dealt specifically with the topic of elections. So, and among the things that he was highlighting in there is he's encouraging the Department of Justice and the Election Systems Commission to go off and ask the Secretaries of State for how they're complying with existing federal law, which includes the Help America Vote Act and National Voter Registration Act, or Voter Rights Act. And what we're finding out is that Jocelyn Benson just said, talk to the hand, we're not going to give you any of that information. And as a result of that, Jocelyn Benson, per the executive order, just moved herself up to the top of the investigation list. Then there's a guy by the name of Chris Krebs. How many of you guys have heard of him before? He was the guy that was the director of CISA, the Cyber Infrastructure Security Agency, that said famously, the 2020 election was the most secure election in history, and President Trump promptly fired him. And now he's calling for investigation. He removed his security clearances, and he also removed the security clearances of his current business partners, which are intertwined in the federal government and making juicy, contracts out of the federal government on your expense. And then President Trump went after all the law firms that had security clearances that were behind the lawfare executed against Sidney Powell, Rudy Giuliani, and himself. And guess who was there for the signing ceremony for this? A lawyer. By the way, she's a lawyer, right? And so that's Gretchen. How do you overcome this? Anyway. And everybody says, but don't we need Congress to act on this stuff? In some cases, yes. But the majority of what we're talking about, Trump has been very specific and very clear about saying we are going to start enforcing existing law. And that's what he did. These are all statutory references in those executive orders. So is there areas of improvement we can do through passing new legislation? Yes. But do we need new bills to secure our elections? No. All right. So how many of you guys have heard the term grant conspiracy? All right. Well, you're going to hear it now. In the wake of the election, how many of you guys remember what happened in Time Magazine? Molly Ball put out this article after, it was like March of 2021, claiming credit for defeating President Trump in the 2020 election through what she admits is a shadow campaign that was actually a conspiracy. So all these conspiracy theorists, there actually was a conspiracy. But they were calling it an effort to fortify the election, not rig it. Well, now we're getting the details on this grand conspiracy. Odie and I, that's Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, put out a report that highlighted that President Obama actually directed the intelligence community to redo their intelligence assessment to make it seem like President Trump had the Russians wanted President Trump to go off and win the 2020 election. That's not what the intelligence assessment said. That is a treasonous act because it was used as a basis for all the impeachment hearings that happened throughout Trump's first term. Then we found out through the Durham annex, they probably sent some intern to go off and burn the burn bags, and he said, yeah, sure, I'll burn them, and then put them in a closet somewhere, and as soon as Cash came in the door, he said, hey, you might want to look at these. In there, found out that the Hillary Rodham Clinton was involved in this, and it was all a distraction. The whole push for Russiagate and this grand conspiracy was intended to be a distraction away from the email gate, where she actually had the equivalent of a dead drop via email server that gave her plausible deniability when she had national secrets on it that somebody could actually break into, and then she could act all innocent, saying, "Oh, I'm sorry about that, but that wasn't me that gave it to the Chinese. They got it on their own." Meanwhile, she probably gave them the password to her server. And then most recently, we've seen example or evidence of Operation Arctic Frost, which indicated that the FBI under Tim Tebow and the Department of Justice under, I think it's Roger Pilford, whatever, they acted, ironically, out of the Office of Public Integrity in the Department of Justice. They were engaged in active lawfare investigations against Republicans, including Turning Point USA, including President Trump, and including my friend Mike Lindell. And so their goal was to make life a living hell for these guys. And you're going to see who is behind that in a little bit. This is something that every time I see it gets my blood boiling. So I want you guys to go off and see it. This video that I'm going to be showing you is undercover video from a whistleblower that was provided to the FBI and Department of Justice before the 2020 election. And so this should put in context all the executive orders that President Trump did on day one, and see if you guys can identify why those executive orders are important once you watch this.
I'm a management and programs analyst.
I work in the national security community.
I spent 3.5 years as a contractor at DHS HQ.
If you read the mainstream press, they all have Signal accounts. Text them, leak everything you can.
I think making sure that we're naming what is happening as a coup.
Totally agreed. In the shutdown BC conversations that I've been having, and that's not on the federal side, we also are often saying, call it a coup.
Do we have any plans for how to respond if there's a coup?
On the 5th, we're going to shut down the White House.
Map the White House and know every access point so we knew we could blockade it.
On the 6th, we're going to shut down larger parts of Washington, D.C.
We've been working on a target map and a framework for scenario. So where are all the police stations? Where are all the key government buildings? Who are the Trump boosters?
Members of Congress that are coming in, we're going to meet them at the airports or at Union Station and send them back to where they came from until we deal with the situation that we're in.
We are going to be in a crisis, but we want it to be one that we are creating. Whoever's got the guns can win. Let's take over the buildings. If there are people that are willing to do that, we should support them. Get ready to shut your city down on the 4th or the 5th. We're going to see potential fighting all over the country or in some hot spots, right? We've already seen that. And so how do we work together across the country to help support each other no matter where we are, and to maximize our impact by doing similar things on similar days at similar time. We have to be willing to put our bodies on the line and take on some discomfort, sacrifice, risk in order to change things. So again, chaos is a soup by which change emerges. Let's get cooking.
Lisa Fithian is a National Steering Committee member of United for Peace and Justice, a coalition of over 1,000 local and national groups, and member of the national team of Extinction Rebellion. Between her, Patrick Young, and the other organizations they are involved with, we should expect to witness a serious attempt to execute their plan.
How many of you guys have seen that before? No. Those were the real insurrectionists, not the J6ers. These were the guys that instigated it. They had scenario after scenario, and you want to know why Trump's going after NGOs with the Doge team and everything? Guess what? These are all their partners. These are all the people that a couple months right before the 2020 election formed an organization called Protect the Results. By the way, you can't get to this website anymore, but you can via the Wayback Machine. And these are all the organizations, all these lefty organizations that were behind this effort to protect the results. How did they know what the results were? That's kind of interesting, don't you think? All right, so that's why you see that. Now, just to show you guys how organized these guys are, and then also highlight why that Sussman-Godfrey executive order was so important, let's take a look at what they had to say in this simulation. Now remember, all those employees that we were talking about, those were employees of the Department of Homeland Security. They're federal contractors, federal employees responsible for the security of our country. Those are the people behind it. So here we go for the, here's their level of planning. By the way, I used to do wargaming systems for the Department of Defense. These guys are pretty sophisticated with their approach.
I think we're going to start with our election simulation timeline to a meltdown today. Is everybody ready?
We're going to read out a brief scenario and then develop a plan based on that scenario.
So the teams are loosely based on, similar organizations in our real world. We have Liberty City Antifa. We have Capitol Disruption.
Group number 2, the Nixon Project. The floor is yours.
Our strategic point of intervention, because we are prominent Republicans, we are first going to approach the mainstream media and to also lean into our networks that we will use positions of corporate prominence to lock out all Republicans, including those on the Trump team, from future corporate jobs, media interviews, etc.
Did you hear that? Yeah. They're actually executed on what they said they would go off and do. That's why they're taking out Rudy Giuliani. That's why they're taking out Mike Lindell. That's why they're taking out Charlie Kirk. And you notice all these folks have their stupid pronouns up there. Now does it make sense why Trump went after DEI as one of his first day executive orders? These are the folks behind this, and they're all funded by all these bozo NGOs that are out there. And so by cutting off the dollars to them, he's cutting off these guys. So this is a big deal, and the fact that he's forcing these guys to come into work and show themselves is a big deal as well. By the way, all this information, you go to millennialmillie.com. She's the one whistleblower. I'll put this together here, and this stuff is the real deal, guys. So how many of you guys have heard of Gary Bernstein? This will put into context what's going on in Venezuela. Gary Bernstein was an ex-CIA station chief in Latin America. He's also the guy that went off and took out the Taliban and put out the operation in that early on when we went into Afghanistan. He put out some videos that are pretty damning. And if you go to a website called stolenelectionsfacts.com, you'll get more information on this and dig into it. Check into Gary Bernstein.
Hey, Matt,
Yeah.
go back another 2 slides. Some people are going to take pictures of your previous one.
I'm going to tell you what. I can give you this whole presentation. You can download it on your website if you want. You want to do that?
Yeah, you can say, if you're good with that.
Yeah, I want to, if you haven't noticed, I want to get this out to as many people as possible. So it's been only 5 years of me digging into this stuff here, and I tell you, this is, what you're getting tonight is literally just the tip of the iceberg. I would love to debate Jocelyn Benson on stage and talk about the integrity of our elections. But anyway, is that what you're looking? So all this stuff is on Millie's website. Check out what he's got on here. It'll give you in context for what's going on in Venezuela and why Trump is so concerned about what's going on there. All right, and does this provide some context to why President Trump was very visible with his signature signing ceremony? Yeah, he knew about the auto pen beforehand. That's why he did this. He knew this was coming beforehand. I'll tell you, he's done a great job of hitting the ground running in this second term, and this is more evidence of that. All right, so I want to make sure everybody understands why many people haven't heard about a lot of this stuff, and it deals with the information war. I invited Rup Raj from Fox 2 News to come out here because he's supposed to be pretty fair and balanced, right? He's trying to make sure everybody has a voice heard. He didn't come to Grosse Pointe. And anybody here from Fox 2 News? I told him that you can wear Groucho Marx glasses and go incognito if you want, or you can come in with cameras blazing. I don't care. But I'm tired of putting Jocelyn Benson out there and letting her lie to your viewers about what's actually happening with our team. All right, so there's no better evidence that we're winning the information war than one of our best sources of information and our best warriors on the information warfare front. They had to assassinate because they couldn't beat him in the debate in the war of ideas. I'm going to skip over this just in the interest of time because I want to get to the Q&A here. But remember Tucker? This is his first podcast after he was kicked out of Fox. He talked about why some of the reasons why he was let go or pushed out of Fox, if you will, on it. And it dealt with the fact that there are people trying to control the flow of information into each of our heads. That's why I want Rup Raj out here. And here's just a quick example of what I'm talking about in that frame.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities, Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But we are concerned about troubling, irresponsible, one-sided news stories
plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 We know where these 4 a.m. talking points are coming from, by the way. So it's a big deal. And it ties into a report that was put out by the U.S. Congress, their Weaponization of Government Committee, when we took control of the House back in 2022. And in it, this report came out on how this one organization called the Election Integrity Partnership actually put together the equivalent of a Ministry of Truth that where we had federal government employees and agencies actively engaged in censoring citizens for expressing concerns around the 2020 election. By the way, they had the same operation for COVID called the Virality Project. Here's the folks that were involved in this. In government, you had the Election Integrity Isaac Center. This is what happens when you're a critical infrastructure like the elections. CISA, which is Chris Krebs' organization, Global Engagement Council. That's what. And then what they call civil society. I don't think they'd include me in that list, but you get an idea. I want to highlight the fact that Harvard is highlighted here, and also Stanford is highlighted, NAACP, AARP, and then all the big tech platforms and big media. They are all working together to make sure that nobody heard what was really happening in our elections. And why is that important? You guys remember this story right in October, right before the 2020 election? Came out, Hunter Biden's laptop had evidence that the big guy was getting 10% from his friends out in communist China. All right, that's a big deal. And what happened right after? The intelligence community came out and said, you know what? That's just a bunch of Russian disinformation. Well, guess what? A lot of people believe the right, not the left. And guess what happened? As a result, they did a survey after the election, and 9.4% of Biden voters would have changed their vote if they would have known that that laptop content was true. And just so you know, that alone, without mail-in voting, without the machines, that misinformation campaign, disinformation campaign alone was sufficient to change the results of the election, because they said 9.4% would switch. Guess what the maximum maximum margin of victory was in the battleground states? 2.8%. That was here in Michigan. That alone, that's why the information war is so important. That's why what Charlie Kirk did was so important, is that engage them in the battlefield of ideals. And by the way, the new DNC chair has made it a priority to go off and win that information war and try to reconstitute their hold on the Ministry of Truth. So let's just close things out with a little bit of evidence of taking action. All right, so President Trump, you know, one of the first things that he did, this is one of my happiest days, because Center for Internet Security is actually a 501c3. It's an NGO that was contracted by the federal government to ostensibly monitor the security of our election systems. And the way that they did that is they installed something, a little sensor they call the Albert sensor, on all the networks for all of our election systems in all 50 states. Effectively, what that is a wiretap of the election systems in all 50 states. They had access to voter registration data, voter history data, poll book data, election results, vote tallies, the whole 9 yards. And they were effectively a man in the middle on this. All that information was pulled up into a central data center. In that data center, there was no oversight, no public oversight whatsoever. They had access to the data, and we don't have access. And they're an NGO, so we can't ask what they're doing behind the scenes. Well, Trump took them out. And one of the first actions he did is that he defunded their support of the Election Integrity Isaac Center, which is one of the things that's recommended. So I was really happy to see that. And I want to put this stakeholder chart in context here of all of Trump's executive orders, because those executive orders are more and more looking like a most wanted list that out of the post office that President Trump is targeting one by one by one. It doesn't necessarily say the keyword elections in a lot of these, right? But he's taking them out. And so he's taken out CISA with that executive order we saw, the EI Isaac with the one we just talked about where they defunded the CIS. Global Engagement Center, Marco Rubio took that out because it's under the State Department. Who was targeted early on for receiving government funds? Wasn't it Harvard? You guys remember that? And Trump threatened to get rid of that? Well, the guy who headed up the Stanford Internet Observatory is a guy by the name of Alex Stamos. He's a business partner with Chris Krebs. So he took out effectively the guy behind the brainchild behind Stanford's role in subverting our elections. And of course, we've seen everything that's gone on with the platforms, right? Trump has taken on TikTok and some other areas. And of course, he's been suing left and right the media outlets and been very effective at doing so. So you won't see this in the nightly news, but I'm telling you, this certainly looks like it's a hit list by the president on the folks who are behind the theft of the 2020 election. And then last but not least, to put in context what's going on in Venezuela, when you look at the Cartel de los Soles, the generals in Venezuela are called, they instead of 4-star general, they call it a 4-soul general. 4-star, that's their approach on it. So it's actually the Venezuelan government that's actually behind this, and they are in the election theft business. They've stolen elections in 72 different countries via Smartmatics. The Smartmatics DNA ties into SPOIA systems and Dominion voting systems, and even ES&S here. Good old Gary Bernstein has all the receipts to back up what we're talking about there. So, what are we doing about it? Well, Mike Lindell, he's put it all online, guys. And I was talking to Kim earlier, and that he's hurting financially right now, just so you guys know. But if you've ever read Mike's book, What Are the Odds, you'll understand that he just throws it all on 35 Black and just keeps working and making sure that everything is done until the truth gets out there, and that's what he continues to do. And I'm working to help him. I'm his Chief Operating Officer for Lindell Management, and effectively, I run that website, electioncrimebureau.com. I'm helping out with the Lindell TV right now, so we can get it. So he's starting to make money off of that now instead of just making it a cost center. Mike was so dedicated to going around this censorship, this Ministry of Truth that they're developing, that he invested a lot of money into a social media app called Vocal, and also the Lindell TV operation. Also a grassroots organization called Cause of America, and then he's put out a lot of documentaries, and also we were tracking real-time election fraud incidents using a tool of Election Nexus and in concert with Vocal in the last election too. So if you guys can help Mike in his efforts, please go to MikeLindellLegalDefenseFund.com or LindellOffenseFund.org. He's literally left it all on the line. Also, if you go to LindellPlan.com, you can help us encourage enforcement of President Trump's 2 key executive orders around the elections. One is at March 25th, one Executive Order 14248, and another was Executive Order 13873 from his first term, which actually targeted the voting machines. Little known fact, it's right now illegal to actually import and use the electronic voting systems like Dominion and ES&S that have any foreign components from foreign adversaries in our elections. Fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 23 National Defense Authorization Act included explicit provisions around the procurement of these devices using federal dollars, and all these states are using grants from the federal government to go off and purchase this equipment. That is all against the law. We've got internal Dominion emails that say 48% of their components for the Dominion Image Gas Precinct comes directly from Communist China. So these machines that are currently in use right now should be decertified, not used, and we need to be going back to hand counts. So get your, I know hand counts is freaking everybody out in the wake of Common Core math standards for the last few years. I get it. But you know what? We need to do it, and hopefully we get enough folks on both sides of the aisle to go off and execute this so we can do it effectively and efficiently. It's not that difficult. We did it for decades before. So anyway, and also there's an election results analysis handbook out there that I put together that gives guidance on how can you determine whether or not you can trust the results of a given election or not. And then here's just a list of some of the criminal complaints that I put together against Benson, against Nessel, against Polis, against all these guys. And while we've had dead ends with everything in the state, like the Attorney Grievance Commission with Benson, and then we are getting traction now with the federal government. So with that, and by the way, I want to throw out kudos for the Michigan House again. We've got 2 resolutions that are out there. One is to hold her in contempt for refusing to comply with the subpoena for the training materials. The other is an impeachment resolution. And here's the book. This is all about the 2020 election. It goes over in detail what we talked about as far as how elections are stolen. And here, this book, Wrestling Gators, is about how government really works on the inside. So this is kind of the inside scoop behind the scenes. And then this is a website my wife and I put together. Everybody asked, well, why are you still looking at this election clock 5 years after the fact? And the first 3 years of this, just so you know, I did it without a steady paycheck because I know who I'm accountable to ultimately. I know what I saw, and I'm not going to let these guys get away with it. So with that being said, thank you very much, and hopefully we still got some time for some questions.